All right, let's dive into a real-life historical detective story, one that stretches across thousands of years. We're going to uncover the strange, incredible, and almost unbelievable journey of Aristotle's writings, from his own hand all the way to the bookshelf you might be looking at right now.
So let me ask you a question. How do you read a book that's 2,400 years old? I mean, it seems obvious, right? You just open it and start reading. But with a thinker like Aristotle, it's so much more complicated than that. The real question isn't how you read it, but what are you actually reading?
Because here is the absolute heart of the mystery. Aristotle was writing back in the 4th century BCE. But, get this, our earliest complete manuscripts of his work, they don't show up until the 9th century CE. That is a 1,200-year gap, a millennium of silence. So what on earth happened in between? Where did the books go?
Okay, to even begin to solve this, you have to understand a crucial fact. There wasn't just one kind of Aristotle, there were two. And his writings were completely different depending on who he was writing for.
On one side, you have his exoteric works. Think of these as his pop philosophy books, dialogues written for the general public, meant to be read and enjoyed widely. But then on the other side, you had his esoteric stuff. These were his private, super dense, technical lecture notes intended only for his students, his inner circle at his school, the Lyceum. So you've got the polished, public books and the messy, private notes. Which ones do you think we have today?
You guessed it, the popular stuff, the books that the famous Roman orator Cicero said had a golden flow because they were so beautifully written, they're almost all gone, vanished. What we're left with are the hardcore lecture notes. And that, right there, is the first huge piece of the puzzle. It explains why reading Aristotle can feel like such a workout. We're basically reading his unpolished, private class material, not the final published version.
So how in the world did these incredibly important notes survive when the popular books disappeared? Well, this leads us to an absolutely wild legend, a story passed down by ancient historians like Strabo and Plutarch about how Aristotle's entire library literally went underground.
Okay, picture this. The story goes that after Aristotle died, his library eventually ended up with a guy named Neleus. Now, Neleus was worried that a local king was going to confiscate the whole priceless collection. So his family did the only thing they could think of. They hid the books. And where did they hide them? In a damp cellar. For over 150 years, these one-of-a-kind manuscripts were just sitting there, getting damaged by mold, humidity, and insects. Eventually, they were found, taken as war spoils by the Roman general Sulla, and shipped off to Rome. And it's there, supposedly, that an editor named Andronicus of Rhodes published them for the very first time.
What a story, right? I mean, it's amazing. It perfectly explains the centuries of silence and why the texts are in such rough shape. In fact, it's almost a little too perfect. So, as you might expect, modern scholars have started to poke some holes in this legend.
You really have to ask yourself, is it plausible, is it really possible that there was only one single copy of Aristotle's entire life's work in the entire world, and it just happened to be sitting in some guy's basement? Well, when you look closer, the legend starts to look a little shaky. For one, it seems pretty likely that other students of Aristotle would have had their own copies of his lecture notes. We also have evidence that his ideas were being talked about and cited during this supposedly lost period. And maybe the biggest clue, Aristotle's own students helped set up the legendary Library of Alexandria. It just makes way more sense that copies of his work ended up there, not just in one cellar. The Skepsis story is probably part of the truth, but it's definitely not the whole picture.
The reality, it turns out, is less like a single dramatic event and a lot more like a massive 2,000-year-long relay race. The text of Aristotle was the baton, and it was passed from hand to hand, scribe to scribe, generation after generation.
Honestly, the best analogy is a giant, ancient game of telephone. Think about it. Every single time a scribe sat down to copy a manuscript by hand, there was a chance for a mistake. You could skip a line, misread a word, it happens. But they also added things. They'd write notes in the margins, scholars call them glosses, and then a later scribe might come along and accidentally copy that note right into the main text, thinking it was part of the original. This means every manuscript we have today is totally unique, with its own family tree of errors and additions.
And this journey was epic. It spanned entire empires. The text went from Greek scholars to Byzantine monks, who did the heroic work of copying them from crumbling papyrus scrolls onto more durable parchment. From there, they were translated into Syriac and Arabic, where brilliant Islamic scholars studied them, preserved them, and wrote incredible commentaries on them. Then, during the Middle Ages, they were translated again, this time into Latin, which basically sparked the intellectual fire that created the first European universities. It wasn't until 1495 in Venice that the first Greek version was actually printed on a printing press. The point is, the Aristotle we read has been filtered through countless cultures, languages, and technologies.
So that brings us all the way to today. When you pick up a modern translation of Aristotle's Ethics or his Politics, what are you holding? It's not just the words of one person. You're holding the final product of that long, messy, incredible history, and the amazing work of modern scholars who piece it all back together.
And what they make is something called a critical edition. This is where scholars act like textual detectives. They'll compare dozens of different medieval manuscripts, look at ancient commentaries, and check early translations, all to make their best educated guess about what Aristotle's original text most likely said. If you look at the bottom of the page in a scholarly edition, you'll see all these tiny notes called a critical apparatus. That's basically the editor showing their work, listing all the different wordings they found in different manuscripts. In fact, the entire system we use to cite Aristotle today, those weird page and line numbers, it all comes from one gigantic critical edition published way back in 1831 by a German scholar named Emanuel Becker. He's the one who created the standard text that's now the foundation for pretty much every modern translation you'll ever read.
So let's end with this final thought. Reading Aristotle isn't like reading a modern novel where the text is fixed and final. It's more like engaging with a living, breathing tradition. It's a scholarly reconstruction that's always being tweaked and refined. And it just goes to show you how fragile knowledge really is, and how connecting with the mind from 2,400 years ago is a truly remarkable and deeply human achievement.